Welcome to another C3 YouTube live stream. C3 is a Columbus based group of illustrators, cartoonists, and comic makers who share resources, events, tips, tricks, and overall good vibes. And if that sounds good to you, you can check out our Discord and Instagram. Our links are in the description. Tonight, it's a very special episode. I'm doing an artist spotlight with local artist Victoria Douglas, creator of Cinnamon, most recent winner of the CXC Emerging Artist Award, and runner of the open source comic making tools resource Halftone Hospital. Victoria, thank you for joining me.
Awesome. Yep, that's me.
Yeah.
I hope
I had to
so.
condense your bio when I was writing it. There
Yeah.
seemed to be a lot. So tonight we're just gonna hang out and draw. Victoria wanted to do like perspective stuff, which I'm never gonna say no to. So we're just gonna do that, and I'm gonna ask them questions. It's gonna be a good time. If you guys have questions for Victoria, please leave them in the comments, and I'll try and look at them periodically, and we'll ask. So there it is. How
Sounds
you
good.
doing tonight, Victoria?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. Um, Coming here straight out of running an event for the local art museum um,
Oh, sick.
for like youth artists. It was a good time.
Hmm. What kind of event was it? Like,
So it was the youth artist showcase. It's kind of a like baby's first gallery exhibit. So a bunch of middle schoolers
oh, okay.
with paintings of their city. Like paint your
Hmm.
favorite place was kind of the theme, and then we put it on display for the evening with some live West African tribal music. So
Oh, okay. Cool.
it was a good time, and now I'm here, and this is going to be a good time.
Yeah, it is. It's gonna be a great day for you. So are you pretty involved with stuff like that, like in your local? You don't have to tell me, but like,
So
where
I'm
like in Ohio are you right now?
right now. My wife and I live out in Springfield, um,
Mm,
which is like 40 minutes west of Columbus, and
hmm.
it's a small town, but they do have a really nice art museum, and that kind of became like our central hub. Um,
Hmm.
and then I ended up saying, "Hey, give me a job." Um, Something to kind of fill in those like the stability gap where comics weren't quite making it. Um,
Right.
Sometimes those paychecks just don't quite come in fast enough, you know.
Right. I get you. Yeah, an unfortunate side effect of doing comics. I think everybody, even like pros tend to find that checks don't come in quite as often or as timely as they should.
Yeah, I feel like it's a sliding scale. Because unless you're at the very very top, it's like, well, I'm doing fine for myself.
Yeah.
If I can be making a career in creative fields in general, because like I do comics and then I also do like murals around Columbus, and like
Hmm.
it's all kind of a comprehensive thing. But I
Yeah.
still like, I mean, if you consider yourself a muralist, you're a muralist. Like, and I consider myself a comic artist or a cartoonist, and that's like kind of self-defined.
Yeah.
And the money just comes when it comes.
Mm. Yeah. I as someone with a day job who is like an artist by night, I respect
Yeah,
the
yeah.
grind of like instability. Um, my mic is really quiet. I don't know. Let me see if I can do something about that. Is that better? I can't tell.
I can hear you fine.
Okay. Just didn't want to echo or do anything crazy. Anyways, but yeah, I respect the art grind. Am I echoing?
Nah, not for me at least.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we'll keep it like this. Okay. Gonna throw a grid up real quick. I'm falling behind. So I'll get to my other questions since still really quiet for us. No, it's not good. Is that better?
That's pretty loud.
That's pretty loud. Okay, sorry.
It might just be on my end, but
Dang, I thought we had this going. I guess we'll go with that. Anyways,
cool.
Victoria, where did the name Blackbit EXE come from?
You know, that kind of came about. Um, I before I was at CCAD, I was at BYU and got kicked out.
Mm-hmm.
And there was this moment where I was like, okay, well, time to self-define what I want the future to look like.
Mm-hmm.
Um, like it was pretty just like rocky, and I really needed something to kind of hinge on. Um, and for me, a lot of like sense of self and worth came from like my art.
Mm-hmm.
Um, as like I can stand behind that, and so I just wanted to make sure that whatever I just like chose as a little moniker was something that I could like something that felt like a sandbox that like
Mm-hmm.
it didn't mean anything, but like you hear it and you go, oh man, that's a whole ass vibe. Um, and I think it was there was no real reason behind it. I think I had a short list of like 100 different words that could like pair together, um, and black bit just kind of rolled off the tongue a bit.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and so I think like I started using that in like 2018. Um, and I'm actually like just now in 2023 starting to look at it again and say, okay, did it like serve its purpose? Did it help me grow into this like flavor of art I wanted to be making? Um, and if so, when is it time to retire it? Um, like, does it still define kind of like what I feel my art's about or what it represents? So I don't know. Nothing's really set in stone. Got to keep things pretty ephemeral. But
I I gotta be honest, that's a much more thoughtful answer than I thought I was gonna get from that.
yeah,
The
I don't think anyone's ever asked about that, but it was a pretty like robust response, um, to just not being like sure about the future,
mhm.
or like changing schools and changing methodologies and like, okay, what am I going to define myself by?
Yeah. I'm surprised because I do the same thing where if I'm thinking of like a moniker or if I'm thinking of like something catchy, I write down tons of notes and there's not really like a eureka moment where it's just like this is what it's supposed to be. It's very like scientific and like you go through all your options. So I'm surprised because it is a catchy name. Like I think it's good.
I
But
think that taps into kind of a larger like some artists are architects and some are gardeners, Like,
Yeah, yeah,
how do you start, or like when you talk about writing, especially, like, are you Stephen King who writes forward with two characters defined at the beginning and nothing else? And I
yeah.
think I'm on the extreme end of like I'll come up with the name and the catchy tagline and like make kind of a filmic treatment with like a poster and everything to like define
Hmm.
the vibe of a project well before I even know what the story is going to be about. Um, and then I just kind of like I make the bucket and then fill it.
Hmm.
Um, and that's suited me just fine.
Do you think that like it stops you from like infinitely like ideating? Like you've kind of built a sandbox that's like finite.
Um, in some ways, yes. In some ways, no. If I never make it past that step, it becomes really problematic. So, like, I'm working on a
Mm,
new book, and I have so much figured out that, like, I could pitch it, but I don't know
mm,
what it's about, and I don't know any of the characters. I haven't written anything, and so trying to
yeah.
transition from like big picture into like real fine grain, like actually nuts and bolts, like I want to write a good story. Um, can oftentimes be like my crux, right? Where I have to shift into like a very uncomfortable mode because I don't really like consider myself super proficient at writing characters. Um,
Hmm.
I write more about ideas, um, and then like fill it with characters, in kind of a science fiction sense. Like I'd rather come up with the framework. And so like for
Hmm.
Cinnamon, it was a cat who like kind of couraged the cowardly dogs herself into these situations. But Cinnamon, the character, came way late
Yeah.
uh, in like the process.
I think that's a very practical way of writing. Like instead of like coming up with an OC that you love and trying to shove like a theme or like some kind of through line in there,
Yeah, yeah.
it's very like structural.
See, and that's like I've been trying to tap into that more of like what is an OC and how did I just like completely miss this whole like dynamic because like the characters are so like secondary to me. Not in that they're
Hmm.
not important, but it's that I'm writing for a totally different like end result. Um, that like I don't really have much attachment, um, in like an OC kind of way. Like
Hmm.
even Cinnamon feels like almost clinical, um, not like in a bad way, but
Yeah. It's just
like
a funny word.
yeah, yeah. I'm a steward of this like weird world, but I'm not like overly concerned with it.
Hmm.
Um, but I don't know. It works for other people way more than it works for me. Definitely not knocking the like character first version of things.
Hmm. Yeah, I actually had a question about writing, but that was good.
Yeah,
I'm gonna skip that one.
yeah.
Let me see. So going back to your childhood,
Back to
what
my
was your
child.
relationship like with, yeah, not to sound like your therapist, but
Yeah, yeah.
um what was your relationship with comics like? Like did you read a lot or did you kind of find them later in life?
So I read like a handful of things, but really like nothing crazy. Um, like Spider-Man and stuff. But I was really invested more in like video games, and um, my parents were very restrictive of media, and so like everything had to be
Mm,
vetted beforehand. And so I would sneak manga in high school, and so my friend would bring volumes of Naruto, and I would read it in the period that we shared and give it back to him at the end of the hour. So I had 1 hour to read each volume. Um,
interesting.
and that was pretty much my relationship with comics was like moonshine bootleg manga rips in the margins of my life. Um, and like it wasn't really till I hit college that I started reading things like kind of for myself. Um, but like I don't know, it felt like something I set aside and said, but that's not for like adult me.
Mm.
Um, and I think it took relearning what like comics felt like to me, to be able to kind of like access that.
Do you mean when it's not for adult you, do you mean like it's not for you to create or it's not for you to consume or both?
A lot of both. A lot of both. I think I stepped away from reading comics. Like I was definitely raised with this idea of like, oh, put away childish things and focus on your
Mm.
career as a fine artist. And it really like wasn't working for me. And so my outlet for a long time was video games, as kind of the, oh, that's for a mature palate. Like, I'll play video games, but I won't read a comic. And um, it didn't really like make any sort of coherent sense. It was just kind of like a product of like how I was told to be.
Mm.
Um, and so it wasn't until I moved to Columbus, and started going to CCAD that I really was like, okay, well, maybe we can like self-determine some of this and like kind of change the name of the game a little. Um,
Hmm.
and so like while I was at CCAD, um, they had one of their library sales, and they were selling all of the first part of Naruto, like their whole collection of it, for $1 a volume.
Wow.
Um, and so I jumped on that about 3 days before my wife's birthday. Um, and that was one of the things we bonded over in high school when we met. Was she was
Wow.
like the brave, cool girl who would wear Naruto headbands in public.
Oh my.
Um,
That is a that is a lot of courage.
and it was kind of a like, you're doing the thing I wish I could do. You're cool. I want to be like you. Um, that like it was kind of a bonding moment. So we started to collect Naruto as like a nostalgia thing, and then I read it and was like, whoa, hold up, that's still got some chops. I mean, it's definitely still Naruto, but you know, it's
Yeah.
I still really love it.
Yeah. I think it holds up, especially those earlier
Yeah,
arcs.
absolutely. And like, I mean, I was reading in high school. I was reading like Naruto and Bleach and Death Note, and it was kind of this like golden age that like I only skimmed across the top of.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, just kind of revisiting that, and maybe just even like reclaiming some of this for myself, where like I felt like I couldn't for so long, or I wasn't allowed
Mhm.
to, was a pretty important step for me, and like finally ending up in comics proper.
Mhm. Yeah, I actually had um other questions about the journey from like because I did listen to previous interviews you had where you were
Yeah,
talking about getting your degree and how it took like longer than you expected and like
yeah,
transferring school, how you were like a fine arts major and a very like technically focused like competitive artist.
yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, so I was raised LDS very
Mm.
rigorously, and like really felt like, oh, I got to make art for God. Like it was my calling in life to be better than my peers.
Mm.
Um, and so I was like really competitive, especially early on. I just felt I was hot shit, in like the BYU art program. I was at BYU Idaho, which had a really great faculty of like, I feel like it's where everyone who is LDS and successful in their field decided to teach.
Mm.
And so they all just kind of end up there. So it's like community college pricing, but like really stellar faculty. Um, and so like, but it was also really competitive. It was like every critique day, they'd give you a sticky note, and you'd go and pin it up on the wall underneath the piece you felt was the best or your favorite.
Mm.
And so every critique day was a competition, and my goal was always to have the most stickies. Um, and by God, I did a lot. Um,
So you did well, like by their standards.
yeah, yeah. I feel like I thrived in it because I was like programmed to thrive in it. I was really like, I really drank that Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
Um, and so like there was this just like ever-present idea of success means external validation and it means technical proficiency, and this idea of like something being up on a wall and somebody seeing it and going, wow, that's good. Like, yes, LDS to queer pipeline. Oh man, kicking and screaming. um, so like I feel like I thrived at BYU for like that competitive nature.
Mm.
Um, but I also didn't thrive at BYU because I was queer. Um,
Oh,
and just kind of like, I kind of said, oh no, there's no way. I'm just going to like suppress everything for the rest of my life and it'll work out and God will take care of me. And BYU just kind of said, nah, go figure it out on your own time. Um,
do you, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, and you don't have to
no,
tell me anything you don't want to, but were you out at this point or
no, I wasn't.
you weren't?
Um,
Okay.
but I was also just like there was one prominent trans student at BYU, and they got
Mm.
sued to oblivion and joined a convent in California that was going to pay off their lawyer fees, and like it
Jeez.
was awful. And so like I kind of hit the nuke button on my education when I was
Hmm.
like, I can't do this anymore. Uh,
Yeah.
like, what can I do to make this work? Because like I'm a star student. I'm doing good. I have all sorts of scholarships. Like you clearly like me here. Uh, what if there was this other side of the equation? And the school said, no, there's not another side to this equation.
Hmm.
Be a man. Be a real good one. Um, and so it's like, okay, fine. I'll go to a school that values me. And they told me to find a new school. I found a new school like 2 weeks later. Um, I flew back to Ohio because this was out in Idaho. So I flew out to Ohio and I toured CCAD, and they had a 30-foot banner hanging up of the Title IX regulations. And at the
Hmm.
bottom it said something like, "You are welcome here." And I was like, wow, that's great. Because BYU's got a Title IX exemption. They do not have to protect you on basis of sex or marginalized groups.
That's
Um,
crazy.
it's insane. Um, and all my professors were like, "Oh man, that really sucks, but good luck, bye." Um, and so I just like left. Um, and that does play into like the whole black bit thing, and like there was this idea of like, what am I going to do? Am I even going to finish a degree? Um, because it was my senior year at BYU, and
Hmm.
so like I felt like I had done good. And it was almost just like to prove to myself I could get the piece of paper. Like, oh, I'm just going to go to CCAD and I'm just going to phone it in and get the illustration degree, and then go about my life. But I'm not gonna let BYU keep me from having the piece of paper. Um,
Hmm.
but um, then CCAD just wouldn't let me coast. They kept saying, "Oh, you should try comics. You should really try comics." And so, yeah, I kept saying no until um, Cartoon Crossroads 2018, um, which is like really formative. So, yeah, not to get like too deep in the weeds of like the whole BYU thing, because I'm
Mhm.
happy to have like reclaimed my life afterwards. Um, but a lot of that period of my life is kind of defined by like my relationship to myself as an artist was so dependent on my relationship to like the church of my youth. And
Mhm.
so like, now I don't really consider myself religious in any sense. Um, and I'm perfectly happy there. Um, but like, I don't know, it's a whole ass thing.
Um, I had a question, but trying to think of it. I don't know. It'll come to me later.
Yeah.
Um, but that's really interesting. I know I've seen you post about like the LDS church, and I didn't know about the previous college stuff and like the
Yeah.
anti-Title IX, but
Yeah.
that is interesting.
They really don't like having trans students at their school.
Yeah.
Um,
That's really unfortunate. That's sad.
it is, and like part of me wanted to feel like the fish who got away. Um, like you don't. I didn't want to have that degree, like that name at the top of my degree. Like
Hmm.
I'm appreciative for the time that I had there, and I wish that those opportunities were available for queer students that aren't going to run their mental health into the ground for it.
Hmm.
Because there are definitely queer students at BYU, um, but a lot of it's just at gunpoint. Um, you got to make it through unscathed, and that's like easier said than done. Um, and so like I don't like burn bridges within the church, and I still kind of advocate and exist in those circles purely because like people are queer in these hyper religious spaces, but like my education and career was wrapped up in it, and like
Hmm.
this kind of perverse sense of worthiness was like really dependent on someone else's metric, um, which is unfortunate. So I will always advocate for like sure, religious freedom, like you should be able to run your school how you want, but you should not run your school like this. You should run it better. Like,
Yeah.
and when your protections exist to hurt other people, like that just sucks. That's not like a fair intention.
Yeah. It's really unfortunate because like even like mainstream like public education, if the goal was to like educate and like spread knowledge like for everyone, which it should be,
Yeah, yeah,
um, it's weird to like attach any kind of agenda to it. Like it's especially something that like discriminates against people and doesn't let them, you're not going to flourish in an environment like that without, you know,
yeah,
killing yourself mentally.
yeah, for
Not to
sure.
like project onto you. Like
No, no,
obviously I'm not.
it definitely took a toll, and like it's taken a lot to kind of deprogram and learn a new way of like thinking about myself and my worth. And um, so like comics specifically was something I never even considered, and kind of badmouthed anyone who like wanted to make their own comic at
Mhm.
BYU because it felt like this overly indulgent thing. Like it is your God-given duty to be a productive, like bread-winning member of society. So you're gonna go and make comics, like you gotta do illustrations for dentists and lawyers and serve the elite in order to be successful. Um, and so that's what I did. um, I did like editorial illustration for like lawnmower companies and anesthesiologists and like really soul sucking, terrible garbage um, that like paid really well um, because they want to support the arts. When really it was like, nah, this ain't it, chief. This is just some weird passion project. Your niece wanted to write a book, and so I'll cobble together some illustrations for you. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but it didn't feel like a good living. Um, and so like I never considered doing comics because it felt like God didn't want me to. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Again, just like really perverse. Like, but it was also kind of a self-defense mechanism of like, oh yeah, well of course I can't do something fun. I can't enjoy what I'm doing. Um, Quite a few people in that program ended up in like LA doing animation because that was one of like the palatable ways to like get a real job. Um, and they're doing great, and I'm like really jazzed for a lot of them. But
Mm-hmm.
um, maybe part of choosing comics at CCAD was kind of a reclamation of no, I don't think that's bad anymore. I don't like hold myself to that standard or believe that about myself or my worth. Um, Not that it's intrinsically linked to money, it's just that it wasn't really intrinsically linked to anything. It was just kind of a bad standard for myself.
Yeah. I was reading um Deviled Egg Dominoes today while I was at work, just like to prep for this.
Oh yeah.
And and it's very it makes sense when you say it to me now. Like, not to like water it down like your voice, but it does feel like rebellious and like individual when I read like some dude doing the sickest skate grind of all time
Yeah.
and like beating the devil. Um, it's very surprising to know like you put so much weight on like what what God thought or like what other people thought when it seems like you're so self-indulgent in a great
Yeah.
way. Like I wanna make this a compliment.
No, it was a
Um,
total 180. Um, and it really was this effort to like and you can see that especially in Devil Egg Dominoes because that was like senior year. I just put all my comics that I had made into one book. Um,
mhm.
and so it really is just like all my academic comics, everything that wasn't cinnamon. And so like um, it's very exploratory, and like you can see the style shift every page. Like
Yeah, for
I
sure.
had no idea what I wanted to be drawing. Like what does this even mean? I was going from like I'm going to go out for days and shoot reference immaculately so that I can paint it in oils to like cartooning, which is not my strong suit. Um, and I think it was like just a totally different approach to art making. Um, and so you can really see that in Deviled Egg Dominoes of like what I was bouncing off of and what I had like kind of valued prior to that. Um, and like I'm happy with it. I'm happy with it for what it meant at the moment, and I'm happy that I put it all into a book at the time and just kind of got it out into the world.
Mhm.
Um,
It's a good book. I mean, I enjoyed it on a reread today. So
yeah, yeah, I'm glad. It was before I knew what good like order numbers were. So like I'm sitting on like 5 boxes of books that like
oh
as soon,
no,
as soon as I get a an online shop up, there will be more Deviled Egg Dominoes for sale.
that's
Um,
good. Yeah,
not by like a terrible amount. It's not like I sunk my life savings into it or anything, but
I know we were talking about us meeting at Space 2019, but
yeah, yeah,
like a good chunk of what I'm selling now is just stock that I need to get rid of from that. So I can I feel your pain.
Yeah, that was kind of an interesting show because like I kind of hedged my bets in selling at anime conventions. Like leaving BYU was like, yeah, I'm gonna make my living doing fan art prints, and like I really like invested a lot of time and energy into that. And so going to space and CXC and kind of seeing like a totally different style of show that was like tailor built for the people selling at it
Hmm.
was awesome. Because I feel like now, like I'll sell at anime shows if like the opportunity arises, but they're always my like worst selling shows.
Really?
Uh, so like I did OhioCon in 2020, and granted, like I still feel like I didn't quite know what I wanted to be doing then, but um, I think I put a bunch of effort into printing new stuff and making new prints and like really going as hard as I could to prove to myself that I was a senior and I was ready to make a living. That
Hmm.
like and then I tanked and I did not sell like anything. I did not break even. Um, it was like, oh shoot, maybe let's rethink this. Um, because I think like in the end like a con can really care about their artist alley, but people are there for anime. It's like kind of an appreciation convention of
Right.
something that's like kind of inherently geographically not here. And so everything here is like yeah, you have to be ready to spend money in an artist alley, um, which is fine. Like I don't want to knock it too much.
Yeah. I definitely think there's different audiences for different shows, and like as someone who's also tanked at conventions, you know, it is a reality check. Um, when you think like you said, like you're a senior or you're recently graduated and you're trying to like prove that you can make a living, and then you get smacked in the face pretty pretty hard.
Yeah, yeah. If anything, like that was a really rocky show for me, but it was also like 2 months before everything locked down for forever, and it
Mm,
kind of just like it gave me time to really rethink a lot. I mean, by then I was pretty well on my way towards wanting to do comics, but at the time, like I had only printed Doubleday Dominoes. Like that was printed for OhioCon
mm.
2020, and it just like it didn't sell well, and like that's fine. Um, but it really like I wanted to re-examine what was anime convention circuit really like the end goal for me, um, and it wasn't. And maybe at that point I started investing more of my time and energy into shows like Space and Cartoon Crossroads, um, or at least the idea of it, because I had my whole list of like when these shows come back after the pandemic, I'm gonna sign up for cake and mice and like obviously CXC. I never got a chance to sell there until this past year. That was my first
Mhm.
chance to sell or to table at all at CXC. Um, and that was definitely a confirmation that, like, yeah, these are the shows that I want to be selling at, um, where I feel like that's where my audience is right now.
Mhm. I mean, I would obviously agree. You won the Emerging Artist Award, so
Yeah,
everyone was
yeah,
looking you up.
uh,
I think you found your people.
they convinced me to come back next year.
Oh,
um, no, no, I really that was a big thing, um, and a total blindside. Um, literally, like Jeff Smith walked past my table, and I like was like, oh look, that's Jeff Smith. He like walks past the table and then turns and like kind of does a little walk back and walks up to my table and points at me. He doesn't say like I won. He just points at me, and I'm like, my dumb ass turns and looks behind me, like, who's he pointing at? Because there's like this little walkway behind the tables, and I really like did not think that that was even like remotely a possibility. Um, maybe I was like looking around at everyone right as the show opened, and I'm like, I'm surrounded by all my mentors and all my favorite cartoonists, and like maybe I just ignored the emerging part, where like there are just a lot of like really established people that I was like, oh yeah, they're gonna win the emerging talent award, like
Mhm.
15 books into their career. Um, that I think it was just a very pleasant surprise.
Yeah,
Um, so it does feel good to be validated for the work you're making.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And it was well deserved, I think. I mean, I think just watching you for the past couple years, like from Cinnamon to like all the
Yeah,
other books you produced, like you're a workhorse, I think, and I respect the technical ability, so
well, I appreciate that. I feel like I've put a lot into it, um, and that's definitely like, I don't know. Life happens to those who show up and those who get lucky in being in the right place at the right time. Um, so like, make good shit and go to events. Like,
yeah.
uh, yeah, you'll see. It's a tricky thing because like life is all about those like moments where someone else has to give you a yes.
Mhm.
Um, whether it's getting a publishing deal or like awards or whatever it is, like it requires somebody else to say yes, or to give that thing to you. And I think that's where like I just consider myself ultimately extremely lucky, um, to have people around me willing to give those yeses. Um, because like my senior year, I got to go to SPX with the Spitball crew at CCAD,
Mhm.
because we do like kind of a yearly like, you were in the book, now go sell the book at SPX, and I wasn't in the book, but they invited me anyways as like a
Oh,
tag
nice.
along, um, and like that was just a really formative experience for me, that like they a few people knew I would really benefit from, and like maybe it's just got me even more amped up to be trying to give those opportunities forward. Um, and so that's a large part of like all the ancillary work I'm doing with Halftone Hospital, is like I want to at least give yeses in, like, you can have tools. You can have tools
Mhm.
to make professional comics. Like you don't have to ask for a yes there. You can just have it. Um, I think was really important to me early on.
I actually if we could pivot toward Halftone Hospital for a second, I did have a couple questions
Yeah,
about
yeah,
that.
absolutely.
Um, and you kind of answered it, but what kind of made you want to start doing Halftone Hospital? Because I think it's a great resource. I've personally gotten a couple templates and halftones from it, so
Yeah, I'm glad. So I'm really obsessive about my tools. Whenever I make a comic, whenever I work on a project, I'll like develop new brushes for it to do exactly what I want, and like then I'll package it up in a neat and tidy little box and keep it in my brush palette, for that project. And so like I'm really process oriented. And
Mhm.
at a certain point, I just kind of said, well, these are just going to sit on my computer till the end of time, or I could give them away. So like I have hundreds of Photoshop actions to like frame and ink the frames and like do all sorts of effects with it. And so I just kind of told myself, yeah, I feel like I've gained so much from comics and from the community that like I really just wanted to give that back, and that's something I could do. Like it was in my realm of possibility to just start releasing stuff. So I'm
Mhm.
still sitting on a mountain of already existing assets that I just need to like put together with like instructions. Um, but that was really kind of the core of it, was like just to give back to a community that already like gave me so much. Um, people were willing to take a chance on me when I was a real untested artist, and like I wanna give back. Um, and it's gone better than I ever like hoped it would. Um, like I expected a few people to download things, like kind of just like in my friend group. Um, but now it's in like 180 different countries have
Oh,
downloaded
really?
assets. Like the vast majority. It's a worldwide thing for sure. Um, and most download for free, but Gumroad makes it really nice to be able to like tip super easy. They're like the best wingman. Um, well, they'll like remind users like, "Hey, you've downloaded a few things. You should probably tip."
Mhm.
Um, and so like it's been enough to like pay for the hosting, for like pay for domain names, and um, some like a little bit of monetary assistance to kind of grease the wheels of some of these resources, has been really helpful. So like huge thank you to anyone who's downloaded anything, but also like anyone who's dropped any money. Um, it makes a huge difference. So
What do you think makes you such a process junkie?
I think when I was in high school and like was trying to figure out what I wanted to be, I had two options in my head, and it was be an artist or be an engineer.
Hmm.
And there are still points where I think, oh man, I'm so left brain. What if I had done that and like be rocking the fat paycheck right now? Because I do feel like I'm very predominantly left brain. Like I won't say it's like nature versus nurture, but I just that's what I like about it. Um, when I was a kid, if I wanted to draw a person, I would draw the entire like anatomical figure and then draw clothes over it. So like
Mm.
in kindergarten, I'm drawing everyone with like genitalia and then drawing clothes over it, and my teachers are like freaking their shit. But it's like, no, no, that's just how people work.
Right.
So, like explain, no, that's how you draw. That's how you have to draw because like it's there. I have to draw it.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I think like I don't know. It's kind of endemic to how I view the world and how I break things down. Is very process first. I want to understand the nuts and bolts, um, which is large part why I love perspective drawing so much. It's because there's rules and like there's
Yeah,
right and
yeah.
wrong, or at least vaguely. I mean, you look at like Taiyo Matsumoto, like undeniably a powerhouse of getting things right in perspective with like the loosest line work possible. Um, so like you can be right while still being like super wrong, and it will still feel like it's accurate.
Mhm.
I think that was like a super important. Him and Masaki Yuasa were like something started to click of like, oh yeah, I can make art this way. I can draw in perspective while still being like the loosest goose, and I really like that. Um, I
Yeah.
also
Taiyo Matsumoto is a monster. I remember the first time I watched the ping pong anime, and I mean it changed my life. Like not even just from an art standpoint, but like I think pretty much everything he does is just like really well written and just like really different. I don't know, like there's a
Yeah.
realism to everything where like I believe that these characters are real.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know.
I read Ping Pong before I watched it, and I
Mhm.
still haven't even finished watching it, and that's so depressing. But like the manga is probably in my top three of just
Mm.
like it's clean, it's narratively so tight. The story tells itself and then it ends. It's 2 years of ping pong, it's 2 volumes of comic, and then it's done.
Mhm.
Um, and like it is just a master class to me, um, in making a sports manga. Um, and so like I immediately bought up the 2 volumes as they released. I think in like 2021. It was like kind of recent.
Yeah, it was
But,
recent.
but yeah, that and like Tech on Concrete,
That
um,
one's great.
number 5. I'm currently reading, and God, it's just like if there were like a handful of artists that were like an initial like inspiration to me in making my own comics, he's definitely one of them. Um, and so you can see that in bits of Cinnamon and some of my looser comics like Templar Vitae, um, draw way more heavily off of that. Just like really dynamic action subjects, but like really narrative focused.
Mhm. Since you kind of dropped Ping Pong as like one of your top five mangas, what are your top three comics? That's one of the questions I had, so we'll knock it out.
Oh man.
If you can pick three. If you go more, I'm not gonna slap your hand.
Um, real influential comics. Uh, Freddie Carrasco's Gleam was it came out at SPX 2019, and that was like I picked up that book and I said, this is what I want to make. Like this like makes sense to my brain. I love this so much. Um, and there's kind of this moment of like validation of, yes, there are people out there making really cool stuff. Um, so Gleam is very significant to me in that like it was this very early canary in the coal mine of, yes, I want to make comics. Um, pretty much anything from Piao was so good. Um, so like No Love Lost is just a crazy sci-fi. Like it's one of my favorite books to hold.
Hmm.
Um, it's just so good. Um, I feel like there's like two kind of major metrics for me. There's like favorites from nostalgia and favorites, or like favorites from like kind of meaningful sentimentality, and then there's like, oh man, this is genuinely good. Um,
Hmm.
because I think like Akira and Gundam the Origin have to be on that list. Um, just being like the craziest sci-fi epics. Um, and I think my reading habits definitely skew more towards manga, just because that was like kind of my gateway to comics in a consuming way. But yeah, I think that and ping pong. Um, one of my favorite books that I read last year, that I'd call it a favorite, is S.R. Arnold's Perry Midlife. Um, if you can manage to pick up a copy from him, it's like fictionalized autobio, but it's like just ratty dude in Philly, just getting ragged on, and then Philly blows up at the end.
Oh, jeez.
It's a wild ride from one of my favorite cartoonists right now.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go back and write these down. I feel like you're dropping some hot wrecks right now.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of good people making a lot of good stuff right now.
Yeah, for sure. I think well, let me go back real quick in case I need a. Okay, yeah. I think not just like comics, but art is so accessible to everyone in terms of like instruction and just like a gateway. Like I feel like it's pretty easy to fall into it.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and we're getting a lot of weird stuff right now, which is exciting because
yeah,
there was a certain point where I was like, are we just gonna like rehash the same, like are we gonna reskin the same like five things for the rest of our lives? But it's good to know that people are like still strange.
yeah. I think that was like a big deterrent for me in comics is that I didn't want to make, like, I didn't want to personally make superhero comics. Like, that just doesn't appeal to me. Like,
Sure.
I have a few, like, runs that I really enjoy from, like, the big three, but it was like, I don't want to do that. And it felt like that was the only option. And that's where I think, like, these small press shows that I went to kind of early in this decision were like I don't know if I would have stuck with it if I didn't feel like I could trust um, that there was like a market for it.
Hmm.
But even then, like saying, "Oh, there's a market for small press," it kind of exists independent of a market.
Yeah.
Like, not that money's not a factor, but like it really is a result of passion and like genuine care for the medium um, in a way that like people often don't stop a book just because it's not economically viable. Um, and it's nobody's like second guessing this, like, oh, does it reach the demo? Like, no, we're just gonna do it. We're just gonna make weird shit, and that's like really cathartic to me. Um, Maybe it feels like it's like truly distancing myself from the metrics by which I used to judge my own art, is to just
Hmm.
exist in a space kind of outside of that level of like clout. Um, like I don't want to be making the most polished, like super palatable thing, you know. I want to be making something that's authentic and real to me, and then let other people enjoy it afterwards. It's kind of a maybe a chicken before the egg kind of a thing.
Hmm. I
But that
think
being said,
oh, go ahead, sorry.
no, I do make pretty like marketable work when it's things like cinnamon and like kind of these more fun action comics. Um, but being able to do more like self-published stuff on the side has been really validating there.
Yeah, I will say like the first thing I noticed about your work was like, and this isn't a knock necessarily to like indie comics, but your work is like undeniably indie. Even Cinnamon, I would say, feels very like underground punk rocky, like counterculture.
Yeah,
Um, but I think you draw very well. Like technically you are a skilled artist, and I think that's what set your work apart from for me at least from like a lot of under indie comics. Um,
yeah,
not to say that indie comics need to be drawn super well, but there is a marketability in your like skill level inherently, if that
yeah.
makes sense.
I think I know exactly what you're like stepping on. and I think it's something that everyone's grappling with in some way. Of like, I don't know, you hear like a lot of indie artists kind of lament skill as a component that like, oh, I wish I could draw better. I wish I could make bigger indie comics. Like, I wish I could do the thing. Um, and like, I don't know. I do feel like I'm coming at it from kind of a real obsessive angle, where for so long it really was about being technically proficient. That like I wanted to have the skill set to be able to make what I wanted. That was like really important to me early on. Um, but then like my style has not regressed. I don't feel like I'm making worse work than I was 4 years ago, but I do feel like it's not as like polished. I keep things real loosey goosey, um, where like I wouldn't have done that before. Um, and so I think it still shows through that like I've put in a lot of work to develop this skill set, but it's definitely like not necessary to tell some of my favorite books I've ever read.
Hmm.
Like especially within the indie space, small press space. Um, and so like yeah, I feel personally like my skill level is more mainstream, but my entire like education is from small press. And so Cinnamon was was kind of made with SPX in mind, but then like when it got picked up by kind of a mainstream publisher, a lot of people would say, "Oh my god, I've never read anything like this. It feels so indie." When it's like, that's am I making indie comics for mainstream audiences? Like, I don't know if I'd go that far. Um, like Baby's first independent comic. Like I don't know. Like what do you do when the word for Image Comics is still the same as like Silver Sprocket? Like it's all just indie, independent. That can be such a weird identifier.
Yeah, I do agree that like our terminology for a lot of things in the comic industry is not it probably needs updated. It feels like we haven't had like a software update since like the late 90s.
Yo, it's true. I feel like that work's starting to happen, and like people really dissecting graphic novel as like the kind of pretentious term that it is.
Hmm.
Um, but like we're probably going to just raise it all to the ground and just like rebuild the entire like self-referential terminology, and I'm all for it. That introspection's important,
Hmm.
because that also like the more that we self-define things, the more that we can define things for a potential audience, um, and get things across in a not better way, but like it's tough to sell a book to someone who just does not have any grasp of what it is.
Yeah. I think there's a lack of like maybe like clarity to a quote unquote normie of like, what a comic is half the time.
Yeah, yeah. Or like I pick up some shifts at the local art museum and I really enjoy it, but like very commonly get asked, well, "Are you an artist?" Well, yeah. What do you make? I make comics. And it's this like kind of immediate dismissal of the art form that like
Hmm.
people are like, oh, that's nice. And then like if they really want to dig into it, I just kind of defer and it's like, oh, I also paint murals. And I'm like, oh, real art.
Hmm.
It's like, ah, nah, if you knew what we're talking about here. Um,
I guess maybe that's what I was getting at, sort of with when I said like your skill level is marketable, I think
Yeah.
normal people will look at something more realistically rendered and be like, good, but it's
Oh,
harder
yeah.
to show them like ping pong, and they'll be like, wow, that's like they don't, the technical skill is not as apparent there,
Yeah. Yeah.
even though like
Sure.
he's so good, like he hides how good he is
Yeah.
in practice, I guess.
It's like comics are a really unique form because like it really forces you to come to grips with your own process because you can't make every page the most polished illustration you've ever done. Like that's just not feasible for most people. Um, and a finished book is better than a perfect book. And like obviously,
Mhm.
if you have all the time in the world and can feasibly like do watercolor paintings for each page and meticulously detail it, like sure. But like for me, I would read a comic and like immediately discredit it all because there's one panel where the face is kind of wonky. But like that's just kind of the reality of it is you're drawing like thousands of illustrations for this thing. Just do it. You just got
Right.
to get it out there. Um, and that kind of flies in the face of a lot of people's identified like taste. Um, it would also be a lot different if comics were like, oh my god, Secret Life of Pets.
I didn't mean
Not
to
a
cut you off,
comic, but
but
good
I did
try.
have to say that.
Yeah, like if comics were structured in a long-term way, the way like animation is for TV, then maybe we'd be having a different conversation. Where like at most comic teams are 5 people and it's very established roles. But like maybe that's what 100 years of superhero comics gets you. There hasn't
Yeah,
really been room to grow in the public conscience.
since we're kind of on the topic already, this is going to be like my big like thesis end all question, but I feel like we're kind of there already. Um, if you could do one thing to change the comic zeitgeist, what would it be?
Oh boy. Um, I think it really is twofold. Um, because like the one major thing, like if I could just like move mountains, is I would want there to be some real recontextualizing event or property or something that's wildly popular that is undeniably like very independent. Um, just like, I mean, everyone knows what Squid Game is. Like,
Mhm.
I just want something to really catch people's like viral, mimetic, super narrow attention span. Um, from a very like unambiguously small press side, um, and that's like almost an impossible task because like I mean it's not even about like I wouldn't want like a comic to be adapted for film because like Nimona is still like in kind of development hell, but like when that was announced that they were gonna make it into a movie, like that was a big like win. Um, but it also like kind of led to a lot of you know screenplay as graphic novels. Um, but just I want it to be recontextualized in the public conscience um,
Mhm.
more than it is. But then the flip side of the coin is I really want Halftone Hospital to be more of a philosophy than it is like a resource that I personally curate. Um, because I'm coming at it from kind of a software development angle, where like for about 5 years I did freelance websites and like web design and programming, and that was kind of my like left brain attachment to engineering in the loosest sense possible. But free and open source software is like so powerful as a like philosophy or a paradigm, where like the licenses that govern Linux are not there to protect the rights of the people who claim those rights. It's there to protect the user's right to access it. And I think that's like, and they kind of affectionately refer to it as copy left instead of copyright, where like you aren't allowed to charge for these core things. Like it has to be available. Users have to be able to access Linux kernel and like whatever, and anything under this license operates by those same standards. And so like that's why we have the Nintendo Switch, and that's why we have Android, and like all these things. And if comics could really understand the ethos of open source, it could be game changing for digital comics, but also just for comics as a whole. If we can get on board with like open source software like Blender and Krita, there's so much potential. Lauren McCubbin had me over at CCAD to talk to the seniors about digital tools, and I kind of just like talked their ear off on open source software for like 2 hours, because there was a software developer that decided they wanted to make comics in Krita, so they spent their summer programming out a comics manager to manage multi-page comics like you would in like Clip Studio. And like that was just one person just kind of doing it because they wanted to. And like, you know, what if that really was the mode, was we can fundraise for features that we want, we can find people who are passionate and have those tools to be able to implement it for comics, because the reality is there aren't very many tools that are built for comics. It's pretty much just Clip. And like that's, you're kind of at the mercy of what, Celsius, whoever's running the show there. And we saw that last year when they announced 2.0 is going to be a subscription model, and it took public backlash to get rid of that. But that's just not even a factor in open source software. It's got its own problems. It's like if somebody stops maintaining a tool, then it just breaks. But for a field that's so grassroots already, it feels like a slam dunk to me to really embrace the open source paradigm, become more active in like the development of the tools that you use, kind of take that like moral ownership. And so like there are some really cool things happening in Krita that like with some finagling and with some like active voices in the community, it could be a really powerful alternative and stay completely free. So that's definitely like my big soapbox for comics is we need to get with the open source program sooner rather than later. But any momentum's good momentum.
Yeah, for sure. I actually just downloaded Krita. I just like discovered it the other day. I'd never heard of it before. But I think especially with like stuff like Halftone Hospital and Krita being free, it sort of made me, maybe not in the way you intended, but it made me like rethink the tools that I'm using, and like, do I even like Photoshop? Like, do I really love working in Procreate? Like,
Yeah.
does this work for me? It's kind of made me go back into traditional a little bit, which might be the opposite of what was intended, but
Now,
um,
see, that's like traditional and digital. Like, boy, that's kind of a topic for argument. Like, people get really passionate about like, oh, I don't use digital tools; it's a crutch. But
mhm,
like the way I look at it, every comic has a digital component, every single one, because
yeah,
eventually you have to scan it. You have to put it together into a book. It has to go to print. Even if you're just throwing it on the Xerox machine and making your own zines, like it's just a rudimentary computer. Like, so to say that you just like, I don't use computers is kind of disingenuous. And so
mhm,
like that's a large part of Halftone Hospital is just enabling people to go from traditional to digital and then back, independent of the software. I think that was something real important to me is like, I don't want it to just be for Photoshop. I want it to be for everyone, um, which means a lot more effort on the back end to make sure that things play nice. Um, but that's like, to me, that's another reason to get really excited for Krita. Like, I haven't done any full comics with it yet. Um, I still use Photoshop for most final work, but um, that's just because Krita's a little buggier than I'd like.
right.
Um, but it's doing some like really cool things um, that I'm not seeing in other software solutions. So like the brush engine in Krita, you can put you can connect any input to any output. So if you want to to drive your brush size with pressure, you can do that. Like that's very typical. That's a very typical behavior. But if you want to invert it so that when you press harder it gets smaller, you can do that.
Mhm,
You just invert like the little curve and like that it's such a simple little thing, but that's not present in like any other software. Um, and like in the effort to make more holistic digital brushes to emulate like physical pens, it took forever before anyone was willing to like attach variables to speed. So like in Clip Studio, you can set it so that like the faster you move, the pen gets smaller or the texture lifts up more. And that's a very real like function.
mhm,
But it also like took the developers to decide that was worth giving us and then implement it. Where Krita just says, we don't care what you want to do with it. You can do any of it at any point. Um, and it kind of puts it back on the user to like build good brushes that aren't going to crash your computer, which I've done plenty of times. Um, so like I really want to see Krita become more mature um, for comics. Like that would just make my day. But maybe it feels like we have a long way to go.
I think I don't know. I feel like with tech, it seems like it's gonna be real slow, and then all at once, we'll just have this like crazy open source. Like, I'm trying to think of something. You remember like when the Wii came out and a
Yeah,
bunch of real shitty like homebrew games came out, and they were like being published like chicken shoot.
yeah, yeah. That was. I
That's
feel like that's when the shovelware really like came into being.
yeah. It seems like I don't know. I'm not a tech head, so maybe I'm not the best person to predict the future here. But with how like AI has sprung up so quickly, I don't know if it's like and maybe I'm being hopeful, but I don't think it's like out of the ballpark for a bunch of people to like get together and be like open source sharing, like Halftone Hospital, but like on a grand scale, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I want. I mean, you want to be the change you want to see in the world, and so like, I would love to start more collaborative resources. It's like Halftone Hospital is inherently pretty collaborative, but also like pretty inaccessible because it is like a storefront that I curate. And so like I've had people send me resources of their own to publish that I'm in the process of publishing. And so the first of those was the security envelopes pack.
Mhm.
That was just like super cool. But like I want to see it be more of a community thing in the future, where like I want it to be something that's not. It doesn't have to be just Halftone Hospital. It's just anyone able to really put their shit out online for people to use. Um, is good by me because like you have the Clip Studio marketplace, but it's just not quite as like there's a lot of free resources, but most of them are paid. Not that that's inherently bad. Like get your bag, but there's a there's an important space needed for just free resources, especially for comics, which is like the most accessible storytelling medium for just anyone.
Mhm.
So I hope that Halftone Hospital can become bigger than itself, and that eventually it's going to be something that I don't need to worry about. That it's just like a part of the community.
Right.
Um, but who knows what that'll even look like? Because like I went with Gumroad because it was just the most equitable and accessible right now. But like who knows if something better comes along, something that's more creator centric. I'm not above jumping ship on that. See, it's all just like it's all really selfish. I just want to see way more cool shit in the world.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a good, like, that's a good enough reason, you know. I think I don't necessarily think that's a selfish thing. I mean, maybe it is, but like if there weren't people who like wanted to see more cool shit, then we would live in a world of like such mid like content.
Yeah,
Not content, but like entertainment. I don't like that word.
content feels so disposable.
Yeah.
I mean, because it is like that. That is literally like the point. Let's let an algorithm just chew it up, spit it out. Yeah, I don't care much for TikTok. Just it's not the kind of content that I want to be making.
Hmm.
That's not what I want my mark to be. It's not really a like definer of success. Is like even like followers on Instagram is just not what I'm aiming at.
Hmm.
But that's also got to come with some caveats because like so much like pretty much every major job I've ever gotten has come through Instagram. Like that's where Behemoth found my comics and found Cinnamon.
Oh,
So
really?
I wouldn't be. Yeah, I was originally gonna Rezo print the first issue of Cinnamon and just self-publish it, and then when everything locked down, I was like, okay, well, I don't know when I'm gonna get to print it, so I just threw it up online for free. Um, and for discerning individuals, it's still on my website. There's just no links to it. So you can still find the self-hosted version of Cinnamon. Um, but Behemoth guys were headhunting for new properties before they had ever even published a comic, and saw Cinnamon as a finished like capstone issue, and said, "Do you want to make more?" Um, so I really I lucked into my first major comic, but like, it was because I had something done and finished
Right.
and online, and they happened to see it at the right
I mean,
time.
that's what you were talking about earlier, where you showed up every day and opportunity knocked. So
Yeah, it's like I couldn't anticipate that, but I was confident in the comic. Like I was happy with what I made. I feel like I made a good comic, and then I put it out there, and people responded well to it, and the right people responded well to it. um,
yeah.
and that's not always a guarantee either. So I do like everything with Cinnamon was just so lucky, and I was so close to saying no to it. And I'm glad I did go through with it. I feel like I learned a lot doing Cinnamon, um, that I'm definitely taking into future books.
hmm Um, I guess still on the topic of like Halftone Hospital and stuff, but like this is more like your personal process. Um, what's your what's your like favorite thing to do when you make art? Like what's the best what's like the highlight of the process?
whenever whenever I can set up guidelines to do something, I'm happy. So like whether that's perspective drawing or doing like symmetric character turnarounds or even like type layout, where I can lay out X heights and guidelines and italics and like that just makes me happy. Um, anything that has that like level of structure, um, is my happy place. Um, and conversely, like I feel like the hardest thing for me has been characters, just in general. Anything, not anything organic, but like making palatable looking people or characters has been like, whoa, thorn in my side. So I think that's pretty visible with Halftone Hospital, where it is focused primarily on the nuts and bolts of creating a comic, in that like most people would not want to be engaging with these parts of comic making, and I'm just
hmm
simplifying it for them. Where for me, it's like that's the joy of it, um, is I can just turn my brain off and lay stuff out. Um,
Yeah. I think Halftone Hospital is sort of a lightning in a bottle situation because you are like a very specific type of person who comes off to me as left brain. Like I don't know if I met you on the streets, I would be like, "Oh, Victoria is like a an artist." Like I would probably say engineer.
yeah,
Um which is good. Like I think the art world needs more like
yeah,
sciency, not sciency, but like,
yeah,
practical
yeah.
maybe
I people
work.
people from different walks of life. Um, one of my favorite artists, on the mural side of things, um, Ross. I've done scrawl with him multiple years. I love seeing him paint. He's a he's a web developer for his day job, and then he like does street art. And the way that he tackles it just makes perfect sense to me, because it is very like process driven and process forward. Um, like just kind of what comes first for you, and like for me and for other people, like who are maybe a little more analytical, like that structure can bring a lot of joy. Um, and so like, yeah, I do think that factors into Halftone Hospital, where like I've known for a long time that like I enjoy doing this part. Um, I've started many online shops selling digital assets like Halftone Hospital, but they've all bombed because I didn't know who I was aiming at. I didn't know who they were for. I just knew I liked making them. And so like it never really found its audience until I started Halftone Hospital. Because by then, like I'm making halftone or I'm making black and white comics pretty much exclusively right now, and so I'm making tools to kind of facilitate that for myself. Um, but then it's also something very clearly articulated. Cartoonists need tools, and that's pretty much what I'm dealing now. So I do like I really enjoy doing Halftone Hospital. I don't see myself really quitting anytime soon. Um, and so that like I love the idea of really just caring for the digital tools we use. Eventually, I'd love to get into physical tools. Um, I'd love to start producing uh, Bristol board for different sizes of comic project with blue lines and stuff. Because like we have the Canson brand basic bitch blue lines for American comics. Like, what if you want to make a different size, a different format? You're kind of boned.
Yeah,
Like,
you are kind of forced into making your own blue line. Or I mean, there's like the manga sized ones. I bought a couple of those,
yeah,
but
yeah,
everything from Deleter can get real expensive. So
it's true. We're like the manga industry has a huge benefit of being like very, very locked and loaded, ready to go, like pretty established practices. Where
mhm.
like, that kind of exists in Western comics, especially for like kind of top level Marvel, DC, like big boy comics. But small press is lawless, and so like that's definitely who I'm aiming at with Halftone Hospital. But like, I want a light table made for comic pages. Like that's not a tall ask,
Mhm.
but getting something in an 11 by 17 size can be so difficult because nothing is really tailor made for an industry that has this perceived lack of money. Um, and so, like, yeah, I want to see it grow. I want to produce comic drafting tools. Um, so eventually, I'd like to get into meat space and actually like make some stuff.
Yeah, I think that'd be really interesting. I think there is a void in general for that kind of thing for comics, especially on the indie side.
I think like for me, like total ideal, like 10-year plan would be to really push Halftone Hospital because like the digital resources I want to be free forever. Like if
Mhm.
I can even remotely feasibly keep things free, like it will be free. Um, there are going to be certain things in the future that like I'm going to want to pay for or have paid. Like if I get plugins made for Photoshop or whatever, like like there are going to be some limiting factors, but like I want everything to stay free. But if I can make physical products to sell, I would love to spin that into publishing, um, and put like make money selling resources to cartoonists and then use it to fund books here in the Midwest. Um, would be real nice. So not to like play my hand 10 years in advance.
I think it's good to have a plan. So,
Yeah.
and based on like the success of Halftone Hospital, like you know, I'll go to conventions and people are like talking about Halftone Hospital. Like it's obviously needed or at least like heavily desired. So
Yeah, yeah.
I can't see people not wanting physical alternatives to it.
Yeah. Well, like, wouldn't it be nice if you could get screen tones without ordering them from Japan?
Oh,
Because
absolutely.
Zipatone and ChartPack have ditched it for 20 years. Like, let's bring that back. I think is the kind of prevailing idea. Um, so yeah, like I think it's a holistic thing, and I'm happy just like making digital assets right now. Um,
Mm.
but I want this to be part of kind of the tapestry of Columbus comics and like Midwest comics as a whole, because there's so much good stuff brewing between like Columbus up to like Minneapolis and Chicago. Um, just so much good small press stuff that kind of just exists in its own little like bubble. And I want to make sure that they have tools.
Let me see. I think we're almost through my questions. Not that we have to stop or that we have to go forever. We can also go whenever you want if I'm keeping you.
Oh
Not that
no,
we
I'm
have to.
good.
I want to make sure you're good. I
Yeah,
know we
yeah.
didn't talk about how long this is gonna go. So,
I'm in it.
oh,
I'm in it for the long
okay.
haul.
I'm glad. I admire your commitment.
I'm having a good time.
Yeah, me too. I think this is real fun. Um, I do have a couple questions left actually. What's your favorite thing that you've ever done? And whether that be like an award or like a panel, comic, illustration. It doesn't
Oh.
even have to be art related, I guess. You could tell me about the time you dunked a basketball or something.
um, Man, that's a good question. I think as far as like hyper recently as well, like CXC this past year was really great. Um, Even just like aside from like the major award, it felt like a validation of what I was doing as an artist, doing as a cartoonist. It was really kind of my first point to be like visible since the pandemic,
Mm.
um, because like we locked down and I hadn't produced Cinnamon yet. Like it wasn't done, and I just never saw anyone again. Um, the next time I saw my professors was like literally 2 years later. Um,
Wow.
and so like I feel like my entire maturity trajectory as a cartoonist happened in a vacuum, and CXC was really like the first point to like bounce that off of people. And so like I
Mhm.
was happy that I was able to finish Biblioware in time and debut it at CXC, and doing the MS Harkness birthday reading the night before was just like really fun. Um, and so I think like just that as a whole, um, everything leading up to that, like I Biblioware has a real special place in my heart as far as like the books that I've made, for just being
Mhm.
like the rawest shit I've ever put on paper. Um, that like I think that was just real meaningful. I mean, we've talked a lot about Halftone Hospital, but like honestly, that's been one of the most fulfilling projects I've ever undertaken.
Mhm.
Uh, I mean, on the whole, best decision I ever made was going into comics and just testing those waters initially. Um, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now if it weren't for a lot of really intense risks. um, so I couldn't be happier with how things have gone so far.
Yeah, I think you do pretty well for yourself. Not to blow
Yeah.
smoke up your ass, but
Oh yeah, that's the last thing I need is to blow more smoke up my own ass. Uh,
can I ask you, you don't have to answer this, but like how's your ego?
oof. I used to be I used to be real full of myself. I really thought I
Hmm.
was like the hot shit. Um, Especially at BYU. And I think that was really like a almost a trauma response of like I can't be the person that I want to be. That's not allowed. So I will be the best artist I can be. And so like 100% of my self-worth came from being an artist. And like uh, CCAD, like especially the first like semester or two was like really rocky. Uh, it was like a rubber band snapping back of like, oh man, did I make a horrible mistake? Like, I didn't feel like I was better than my peers, but I just like there was no like vicious attack dog competition going on. Um, and then especially swapping into comics, it felt like I had to relearn everything. Um,
Hmm.
I I had only drawn a couple of token comics before I sat down for the first day of the capstone comics course. And so I was talking to, I pulled Lauren McCubbin aside the previous week and sat down and I said, I'm scared shitless. I've never made a comic before, and now I have to make a whole ass one shot comic. And like, I think for the first time, I just felt like bottom of the barrel. Like,
Really?
relearn everything. Um, and it was like really intense, um, full of recontextualizing moments where like I'd pull aside my art history teachers and be like, okay, like I don't understand why this art's valuable. Like I know that I have a very limited paradigm for like what I consider to be good, and I'm trying to expand that. Can you like talk to me through this?
Hmm.
Um, like Yaoi, the dot lady, like there was just so much, especially in like the art history classes, where I was like, oh man, I'm just not getting this. Um, and so like I think now I try not to like engage with that part of my brain of like whether or not my work is good. Like I don't find myself comparing myself to others or like comparing follower accounts, and like it matters less to me. Where I think as long as it's the work that I want to be making, it's just real self-guided right now.
Hmm.
Um, so too bold of me to say I feel more humble, but I feel like CCAD was incredibly humbling,
Hmm.
um, in that it was so far out of my comfort zone, and it forced me to grapple with so many things outside of like my view of everything as a meritocracy. I really like that was a big hang up. Like everything, like if you're good at art, you will get good in return was
Yeah.
like real difficult to unlearn. Um, and so like even now, like I'll see a book and I'll go, man, like I just don't get it. But I can kind of at least compartmentalize it and go, okay, but like I read it and it's really damn good. And maybe just like surprise myself a little bit more. So yeah, as far as
Yeah.
the ego goes, it's a process.
I I appreciate you being so honest about that. I feel like that was a really weird question of me to ask when we barely know each other. So I uh I respect your
No,
honesty.
no,
Uh, and I like resonate with that because like specifically when you're talking about the competitive nature of your previous school and comparing that to CCAD, even now I feel, and especially while I was going there, I felt kind of resentful that there wasn't that like cutthroat competitive environment.
yeah, yeah,
And I don't think it's a healthy environment, but I do think it makes you technically good. And I still have like a hang up on like the meritocracy thing where like if I am good at art, good things happen. You know, if you put work in,
yeah,
you're going to get like an equal amount out in terms of like life quality.
yeah. Like it's some transactional thing that like the
Yeah,
universe does not respect how I feel about it. Um,
right.
no, like I think I agree. It really bothered me when people would have issues with like a professor or with like a class, and it would really rub me the wrong way when they were like waiting to be handed this like answer or this path to success where
Hmm.
like being unwilling to read books outside of class or like I do feel like the people who got the most out of their time at CCAD were the ones who were willing to put the most time in outside of CCAD.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
where like, and that's obviously like there's so much like dissecting privilege. Where like, oh yeah, it's a meritocracy. I'm good because I put in the hard work. Well, like I also came from like kind of an upper middle class home, and so in high school I got
Right.
my first drawing tablet and it was like a $300 tablet that like that enabled me to learn art in high school like in a really robust way. Like I was able to have the tools I felt I needed. And so like yeah, I did go into college with a leg up, um, because I was allowed to. And so like I think that was an important thing for me to just like kind of get off my high horse on, is like some people don't have those opportunities, or like heaven forbid, I found out that one of my classmates was taking care of their ailing grandmother at home after school. And I was
Uh-huh.
like, oh, okay, man, I really had like a harsh view for someone who was doing like the most for them. Where like, does that mean that at the end of the day, privilege can lead to like situations where you're able to grow more than your peers or like whatever? Like, yeah, I don't feel like a very like robust voice there.
Hmm.
Um, but again, like maybe that's part of Halftone Hospital is I want to get rid of barriers, um,
Right.
to put people on equal footing. Like you shouldn't have to pay $100 to get like the Max Grecky Ultra Pack of brushes to be able to make cool stuff like Lore Olympus.
Hmm.
Just like let's go, let's make good shit. Um, because in the end, like yeah, it is right place, right time, and if I can help with one small part of that equation, then like, and I don't think I would have come to that conclusion without CCAD and without that kind of like real like casual approach to success. Like that feels like the wrong way to put it, because like the faculty
Hmm.
really care about fostering proficiency, um, but it's a tricky little thing to navigate, and it's
Yeah.
it's definitely not like an equation that maybe I viewed it when I was in my 20s. Um,
Yeah. The fact that it's a part of like an institution too, and like, yeah, you should. like put work in outside of class, but it's also like, well, what are you paying all this money for? You know,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
what is what are they kind of obligated to give you
yeah.
for hundreds of thousands of dollars? It
No,
is weird. And if go ahead, sorry.
no, no. That's the super valid counterpoint. Like you are paying an absurd amount of money. So where's the value? And I think that's where some people's questions kind of stem from.
Yeah. And I think especially with like there's so many good alternatives to art school now where it's like CGMA or like artists who are putting out their own courses like Steven Zapata and Ahmad Al-Duri,
Oh yeah,
like, and they are insanely high quality for a, a fraction of the price, you know.
yeah,
But
like
then again, you're not getting the
yeah.
community that you get at CCAD or another college, so it's
Well,
weird. It's a weird situation.
I'm convinced that art school's not the right move for probably most people,
Mhm.
but like it really requires like a self-starter mentality. So like I have a list of about $500 worth of art books that like whenever anyone says, "Oh, you graduated from CCAD in comics," like would you talk to my kid about it? They want to do comics. I'll literally send them this list, and I'm like, graduate from high school, take a summer, buy these, read them, like really like ingest that, and if you want more of it, choose it, and then go to school
Mhm.
for it. Um, because like I mean, I was only at CCAD for 2 years, but there were like so many times where I feel like at that point in my life, even I was just valuing the networking more than like because I did feel like the skills are something you can develop outside of art school, like undeniably,
Mhm.
even just for free on YouTube. Like, and so like, what was the value proposition? And for me, it was meeting faculty that are still my friends even now. Like, there were so many times when I'd take a class, not because I valued what was like in the class, but because I wanted to get to know the professor teaching it.
Yeah.
Um, that like that paid dividends for me, and that like there's some of my lifelong friends now. Like, but that's only like one approach to it. I think there's so many. Like everyone goes into art school with something else that they need out of it.
Mhm. Yeah, I definitely feel like I was an art school kid. Like even though I'll sit here and bitch about, you know, certain professors or like not feeling
Yeah,
like I got value in certain areas. Um, I liked even though the whole atmosphere wasn't competitive, like I've got friends from college like that I still talk to this day who like I am competitive with because I don't want them to like, you know, make
yeah,
strides ahead of me. And I worked harder in school because I saw how good these guys were. And I don't think that would have hit me the same way if I had done like online courses or just like read a book by myself.
for sure.
So there's definitely a communal aspect uh, for some people. But I agree with you, like the information is out there 100%. And like reading a book is infinitely more valuable than some courses that you'll find.
It's true. Yeah, it's like when I first like I took my first comics class, and then that summer I did a rigorous like comics boot camp for myself where I
Mm,
chewed through every comic on my shelf, and I counted every uh, all the panels on every page, and then averaged them out in a spreadsheet to figure out like how many panels does this artist use on average? And then how many word bubbles are in each panel, and how many words are in each speech bubble? And like I just wanted all the numbers. Um, and like, was that necessary? No. Did it help me feel like I was understanding comics more? Like, yeah. That was what I needed at the time. And so when people do like weird batshit stuff in school, I'm down to roll with it. Like, by all means, make the weird shit, do the weird thing. Like, in the end, it really is up to you to kind of curate what you want out of life as a whole, within reason. And like, I mean, I couldn't be more grateful for CCAD, because like, even with like potential gripes or whatever, I mean, you and I both went there. You and I have both stuck around here post graduation, and now we're hanging out, drawing and chatting. And like, is that like a direct sequence of events? I don't know, maybe not, but like, I think it's all part of a larger tapestry of Columbus being just a real great place to be making comics right now.
Yeah.
And so I think really, like, the people who are going to CCAD right now, the major benefit that I see is that you're just there. Like, you're here in this city making comics right now, where you have an opportunity to table at CXC or at Space, or be in proximity to countless other small press shows. That's like so monumental to me. So like, apply to the shit and do the shit. I definitely get
Right. Oh, go ahead.
with CCAD, because it was like a bad breakup, and like CCAD was the rebound, and so like, it was exactly what I needed, exactly when I needed it. And I also just kind of have to understand that that's not the case for others, and that's also valid.
Yeah. And I think like, different places have different things to offer people at different times of their life. Like, I don't think it's like wild that people got a lot of value out of CCAD. Like, because I got value out of CCAD. Like, I'm not gonna sit here and say that CCAD was like a bad time the whole time, because that's not what I think.
Yeah.
But I think it's like, and maybe it's like what you value at the time isn't really like, you don't appreciate what you get out of it until
Yeah.
like much later down, because we are like sitting here drawing and like indirectly because of CCAD, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, and that's not even to say anything of like OSU's part in this, because I know that a lot of the founders of C3 came through OSU's avenues, and that's
Absolutely.
equally as valid. Um, in the end, I think like, if school's the right move for you, you kind of know it.
Hmm.
I am a huge advocate for taking a break after high school and not jumping straight into things. Um, there is this like perception that, if you don't get on fast, then you're not going to be Tilly Walden. Like, you're not going to be making like whole ass graphic novels at like 17 years old. But that's also like not going to be the case for most people. And so like, it took me 10 years to graduate. There were pretty extenuating circumstances across that whole like 10 years, but it happened at the right time, and now I'm doing what I should be doing. And I think that's like I have a lot more acceptance of that now, compared to maybe when I was a bit younger and felt like every moment that I wasn't like hyper successful was a lost opportunity.
Yeah. And I think all that does is like, because I do the same thing where it's like, well, if I was just a little bit better, then I'd be further along in life and like be quote unquote happier, or like what I would perceive as happier. But
Yeah,
like, you don't know what you don't know until you know it. So like, the lessons that you think you maybe should have learned at 18, 19, and it took you until you're 25, 26, like, you can't feel bad about that. Like,
that's true.
you just didn't get that. You just didn't like spec into that yet.
Yeah. Well, and comparison is the thief of joy.
For
Like,
sure.
so easy to just kind of compare, maybe wrongfully, but like, I don't know. I still feel like such a fledgling comic artist, and like I know some part of it is imposter syndrome, but like really I feel like we all just don't know what the fuck we're talking about.
Mhm.
We're all just figuring it out one step at a time. Um, just trying to make it all work, and that like there's not just like one finish line to cross, especially in comics. I mean, there's no like end game build for like I'm just going to be Raina Telgemeier and make a gajillion dollars on Scholastic deals.
Mhm.
That'll happen, and then I'll be a good comic artist.
Yeah,
So
it's hard to roadmap. Not even just in art, but like life. But
yeah,
if you're
yeah,
factoring in like something as nebulous as good and bad art and what people will and won't uh like resonate with, that seems like you're gonna set yourself up for a bad time.
yeah.
And I'm
No,
talking to myself from the past slightly, not just you, because
yeah, yeah.
Victoria, we are a little bit past 9, and I usually go and try and do it around 2 hours. Like I try and keep it around 2 hours for these.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
if you're cool with me asking like one final question, because I think that's all I got left,
Yeah, yeah.
uh, I'll let you go, and we'll be on our merry way.
Sounds good.
Um, Actually, I got two. I got two. Um,
Yeah.
so what genre, if any, do you prefer to work in?
If I had to say one, science fiction. Um, I feel like it's such a big meaningless word that like you can say it and then make whatever book you want and then it is science fiction. Like so it's not necessarily like the most important metric, but I think for me it's about uh, like the core idea of sci-fi is just we're going to take humanity and we're going to apply some erroneous quality to it. We're going to change the equation from what we exist in now and make it different. And then we're just going to see
Mhm.
how people react. Um, and that's where characters get their moment to shine. And that's where like you can write a good story. But like, what stories really aren't about that like core idea? Um, so yeah, if I like, I could work in science fiction for the rest of my life and be perfectly happy. Um, just kind of chipping away at like crazy, weird what if books. So,
Are you like a Twilight Zone, like kind of anthology kid growing up?
oh yeah, oh yeah. I
Okay,
I loved
that's the vibe.
Twilight Zone. I love short form science fiction. I used to write a lot of short form science fiction. Um, and so like Black Mirror came out and it was like crack cocaine. I love that shit. It kind of gets like it's a little pastiche, but you know, I love Black Mirror. Um, Almost like in a romance novel kind of way. Like it really is just like that extremely concise what if, and like also really depressing.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a mood killer sometimes.
It can get pretty intense. Um,
Have you have you checked out the Guillermo? It's not science fiction, but it's like
Cabinets
anthology.
of Curiosities.
Yeah.
No, I haven't yet. I finally just watched Pinocchio last night.
Oh, really? Did you like it?
I loved it. Oh my god! I thought it was going to be lighthearted with like some darker moments, but man, gut punch.
Yeah.
We're gonna fight Mussolini. Let's go.
Yeah. It was fun. I liked it a lot.
I really liked it. I told Sam I was so sad that we didn't double feature it with the Disney remake because I wanted to watch them back to back so bad.
Yeah. I would have, but I don't know. There's something about it's really scary. The CG Pinocchio that looks just like the 2D animated one.
Yeah, it's. I understand that Disney's got its place. I'm a big Disney fan on the whole, but the cash grab live action just isn't doing it for me.
Yeah. Can't blame you. Can't blame you there. I guess my last question, and this isn't really a question, but like, you got any current projects you wanna talk about or plug, or if you want to
Oh,
keep it hush hush, that's cool.
I guess I can give a little bit of something. I'm working on like the next big post cinnamon project for me, and that's still in the very rudimentary stages, but I'm like really excited about it. So it's going to be about a civilization of sheep
I'm
set at
sold
the
already.
dam in like the far, far future, because the Hoover Dam is going to be one of the last things to outlast humanity. Um, and so humanity decided to put something worth protecting in the bowels of the Hoover Dam. Um, that then these sheep people have to grapple with. And like, it's just going to be a big, twisty thriller um, about sheep. And it's going to be called Steel Wool.
Oh, that's a great name.
So it's, I don't necessarily want to reveal too many twists and turns,
Oh, no, no, no.
but like,
Wanted to know what was on the pipeline.
yeah, it's the next big like multi-year kind of a deal. Like I do not see it being done anytime soon, but it's exciting. I think I really like writing fiction, and this feels like just kind of the next big opportunity. So I'll probably at least be like polishing up a pitch this year and trying to like throw it in front of some people and see where it goes.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to it. The the sheep people.
Yeah, I'm like in my head, I'm like, do I really want to draw an entire graphic novel of sheep? And the answer is yes.
I was gonna say, why wouldn't you?
Um, yeah, it's gonna be a fun time. I live about 10 minutes away from a dairy farm that specializes in goats, and so I can just go down there and draw goats and sheep and cows for as long as I want. It's like match made in heaven. If I'm going to live out in the middle of nowhere, I'm at least going to benefit from it.
Right. Yeah, that's a great place to get reference, so it was meant to be.
Yeah, yeah. So other than that, I think I want to keep making biblioware books for as long as it makes sense to. Like, that was just really uh, like a palate cleanser.
Mm.
And so I just want to make weird, fun autobio in the margins of larger fiction. And that's good to me.
Yeah, I think everybody will be down for literally whatever you create next based on your track record. So I don't think you have much to worry about in the way of the post-apocalyptic sheep.
I hope so. I feel like Cinnamon inadvertently tapped into a demographic that I don't think anyone else ever has, and it's the spouses of comic book nerds.
Hmm.
Because that was huge. Is like all the girlfriends of dudes who are like super into comics are like, oh my god, he brought it home for me, and he knew I loved cats, and so it was like a slam dunk for like this very weird niche, and I,
Mhm.
I think that drove sales.
Yeah, I mean it's a really good gift idea for people who are like, I my girlfriend Darby probably gets sick of me constantly talking about comics, so if I could like find a little niche comic for her, that would be
Yeah, yeah.
ideal.
When you can say, I know this is relevant to your interests and mine, like that can be pretty powerful. So I think I cornered the market for like weird ass cat lover comics. But maybe lightning will strike twice. I'm at the very least really happy doing what I'm doing. Very lucky to
Mhm.
be able to be doing it too.
So maybe you don't have this planned out yet, but are you looking for like at Behemoth to publish Steel Wool in the future? Or are you
Uh,
trying to like go a different publisher?
I won't preclude it if they're interested. Um, but I'm also not like married to Behemoth. They were kind of my big break. They took a chance on Cinnamon, so like I'm grateful. But um, I don't know. I want it to push more towards graphic novel rather than like monthly serialized,
Mm.
and so it may not be the right home. But yeah,
Well,
time will tell.
yeah. Well, I'm excited, so we'll have to have you back on in the future when Steel Wool debuts, and we'll do a little promo stream.
Yeah, yeah. Gotta
Uh,
start the hype train early.
for sure. You heard it here first, everyone.
Yeah, I think like I've been like posting some like very very loose concept stuff, mostly in like the C3 Discord, just like
Mm.
popping in once a month to like look at my weird little shit, and then disappear again.
That's
Uh,
what the Discord's for. We just want
yeah,
to keep tabs on everybody's.
no, but I'm excited to have more to show people at a future date. But this has been real fun. It's been
Yeah,
good.
I appreciate you coming on. It's been a lot of fun. Great drawing. I know I haven't addressed your drawing because our conversation's been so riveting, but
Oh yeah, yeah. We've just
just
kind of gone at it.
yeah. Um, but yeah, thank you for joining me. This has been a really good time. And
Yeah.
for those of you watching, I've put Victoria's website and Instagram in the description, so you guys should check that out if you're not already. I assume most of you are already, familiar. But also follow the C3 Discord and what else? What else? Oh, next week Thursday's February 23rd. We're gonna do another stream for C3's BIPOC anthology, so be able to look out for that. We're gonna have all of our creators from that on, and they're gonna talk about our work or talk about their work, and we're just gonna promote it, hype it up, and share good vibes, just like tonight. So that's what we got planned.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Thank you again, Victoria. It's been a blast. So
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Hope to do more with you guys. Just like really love what's happening in Columbus and the amount of groups popping up to support and facilitate comics. Like that's all we can really ask for.
yeah,
So
absolutely. And we'll have you on whenever, seriously. So
yeah, definitely keep me in the loop.
before I let you go, I did do this thing last stream, where I went
Yeah.
C3 and I threw up this little gang sign.
Let's
And
see.
if you could do that, yeah, C,
Which,
yep, you got it.
yep.
So if we
Just
could
got to
just
make
do
sure I'm
that,
not weird.
yeah. So if we could do that, if you could share that with me to end this stream, Victoria, I would be grateful.
Absolutely can.
Because it is sad when I do it by myself. Uh, 3, 2, 1, C3. All right.
Yo.
Thank you guys. Good night.
Yeah.